There are movie flops, and then there is Fant4stic 4 from 2015. Any movie can fail at the box office. Sometimes the marketing is bad. Sometimes the release date is terrible. Sometimes the movie comes out at the exact wrong moment. And sometimes it feels like the movie somehow offended the movie gods. Usually one of those things is enough. But every once in a while, a project manages to check every single box on the disaster checklist. First, you make the movie not because you have a great idea, but because the rights are about to expire. Second, you start cutting the budget during production and throw away 2 or 3 major action scenes along the way. And third, you make the script as boring and generic as humanly possible. That is how magical movies like Fant4stic 4 are born. To be fair, the film is not quite as horrible as critics, and everyone who loves repeating critics make it sound. But it is still bad, and it is hard to say who deserves more blame. The studio, which basically pushed director Josh Trank out once everything started falling apart, or Trank himself, who apparently shot something so alarming that studio executives probably needed medical attention after watching the footage. Most likely, we will never know the full truth. Everyone involved, very predictably, blames everyone else. So today, let's look back at the powerful reboot of Fant4stic 4. When Fant4stic 4 Rise of the Silver Surfer failed to meet Fox's box office expectations in 2007, the studio decided to reboot the franchise. But this was not exactly a passion project. Fox had to make another Fant4stic 4 movie within 7 years, or the rights would return to Marvel. So, for 7 years, the studio tried to figure out some kind of movie. In the early 2000s, one version almost happened. David Yates, who had directed several Harry Potter films, was attached to the project. The main roles were supposed to go to Adrian Brody, Alice Eve, and Bruce Willis. And since Bruce Willis at that time was already a big fan of showing up on set for a couple of weeks and then disappearing, the idea was that he would play the Thing. Meaning basically he would voice a pile of visual effects. But the project kept stalling because of script rewrites and budget arguments. Eventually, all the actors walked away, and that version of Fant4stic 4 was shut down. Then, in 2012, Josh Trank showed up seemingly out of nowhere with Chronicle. It was a low-budget superhero movie that made $126 million worldwide on a budget of only $12 million. Overnight, Trank became Hollywood's newest hot director. Suddenly, every studio wanted him. He kept getting attached to one project after another. At one point, he could have directed Sony's Venom, but one producer basically laughed his pitch out of the room, and Trank walked away. Then he moved over to an adaptation of a famous video game, but that also went nowhere. Once again, the problem was the script. Watching Trank run from one stalled project to another, Fox offered him a sequel to Chronicle. But Trank dug in his heels. In one interview, he said he deliberately sabotaged Fox's attempts to make Chronicle 2. He did not want to make it, and if someone else made it, they would probably make a terrible sequel anyway. So naturally, Fox rewarded this attitude by offering him Fant4stic 4. According to Jeremy Slater, one of the writers on the new Fant4stic 4, Trank did not even want to make a comic book movie. He did not like comic books and thought they were nonsense, which of course made him the perfect choice to direct Fant4stic 4. But Fox convinced him by promising him serious creative control. Trank wanted to make a movie that looked and felt nothing like what Marvel was doing. And naturally, that meant everything had to be dark, grounded, and realistic. The problem started before cameras even rolled. Trank got into a fight with screenwriter Jeremy Slater, even though Slater was the writer Trank himself had brought onto the project. Slater left and Fox replaced him with Simon Kinberg. Yes, the future director of X-Men Dark Phoenix. In hindsight, maybe not the most reassuring name to bring in when your superhero movie is already in trouble. Together, Trank and Kinberg somehow stitched together a messy script out of several of Slater's drafts, and that mess became the shooting script. In that version, the third act was supposed to be much bigger, with an entire city being destroyed again, because apparently every superhero movie at the time was legally required to level a city. You can even see references to that sequence on the Fant4stic 4 posters. Ironically, one of the biggest things advertised in the marketing campaign never really made it into the finished movie. Then came the casting process, which turned into its own battlefield. Trank was allowed to choose some of the actors, but in a few cases the studio pushed back. He wanted Allison Williams, who many people later saw in Get Out. But for some reason, Fox rejected her and insisted on Kate Mara. The studio also did not want Miles Teller in the movie, but this time, Trank refused to back down and Teller was eventually cast. There were also rumors that Mads Mikkelsen auditioned for Doctor Doom, but after meeting with the director and producers, he immediately decided he wanted no part of this and left right in the middle of the audition process. And with all of that baggage, filming began in May 2014. To the surprise of absolutely no one, everything went wrong. The atmosphere on set was apparently wonderful, in the same way a kitchen fire is technically warm. Josh Trank argued with almost everyone around him. He ignored advice, fought with people, and at some point reportedly stopped talking to almost everyone. But he still found time to make Kate Mara's life miserable. According to rumors, Mara often left the set in tears. Supposedly, Trank could not forgive the studio for rejecting Allison Williams, so he tried in every possible way to prove that Kate Mara was a mediocre actress. The conflict with Mara at least has some kind of explanation. The conflict with Miles Teller is harder to explain. Teller saw where the movie was heading and started trying to change his dialogue. He disagreed with Trank on many things. Eventually, they clashed too, and after that, they also stopped talking. When 2/3 of the movie had been shot, Fox demanded to see rough footage and sent it to test screenings. The results were depressing. Trank insisted that this was exactly the kind of reaction he wanted from the audience, which is certainly one way to process bad test scores. But the studio ordered the movie to be urgently reworked. Trank refused to make the changes Fox wanted, so Simon Kinberg and editor Stephen Rivkin made them instead. There is an important detail here. According to Trank, the first 2/3 of the movie were mostly damaged in the editing room, while the final third was completely changed by the studio after the budget was heavily reduced. That destroyed city from the posters disappeared, and the scale of the finale was cut down dramatically. Supposedly, Fox saved around 30 to 40 million this way. So yes, maybe the studio really did damage the director's vision. Bad editing can absolutely hurt a movie, no argument there. But the problem is that a lot of the stupid and unintentionally funny moments in Fantastic Four could not have been saved by better editing. The movie is filled with exhausted plot devices we have seen far too many times before. For example, a group of brilliant scientists arrives in a strange, unknown place and immediately starts touching everything with their hands. Apparently, the first rule of being a genius is losing 40 IQ points the second you discover another dimension. Josh Trank later said that his version of the movie was supposed to run 2.5 hours, while the studio cut it down to 1 hour and 40 minutes. He claimed that he gave Fox his own cut and that the studio promised to show it to a test audience. But even though Kinberg and Rivkin's version also did not go over well with test audiences, Fox chose that version anyway. By the time Fantastic Four arrived in theaters, everyone already knew a massive flop was coming. Critics destroyed the movie. Audiences joined in and rated it somewhere in Catwoman territory. Joshua Trank's film opened in second place at the US box office, right behind Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. In its first week, it made $25 million. And then, after an already weak start, the second weekend brought one of the biggest box office drops in American history. In the US, the film finished with only $56 million. Overseas, it made another $111 million. And while the marketing budget for Fantastic Four was clearly not enormous for all the reasons mentioned earlier, a worldwide total of $167 million was still not enough to cover a production budget of $120 million. Later, Fantastic Four also picked up a few Golden Raspberry Awards. And not just any awards. It won in the most important categories, Worst Picture and Worst Director. Trank's career took a brutal hit. Overnight, Hollywood went from chasing Josh Trank to pretending it had never heard of him. Disney had already hired him to direct a movie in the Star Wars universe, but after the Fantastic Four disaster, the studio immediately showed him the door. Trank himself kept pouring fuel on the fire by writing on social media that the studio was to blame for everything. According to him, he had made a great film, and the producers ruined it. He also claimed that Fox wanted something more like Marvel, so they took his dark, realistic movie and turned it into a dumb comedy. Trank returned to filmmaking only 5 years later with Capone. This time, nobody interfered with him, and somehow the audience scores for Capone ended up almost exactly the same as the audience scores for Fantastic Four. Miles Teller also suffered because of the failure of Fantastic Four. The actor quickly lost his role in Damien Chazelle's musical, the same musical that would come out in 2016, make more than $400 million worldwide, and become one of the biggest winners at the Oscars and the Golden Globes. Fox did not really want to make a great Fantastic Four movie. Fox wanted to keep the Fantastic Four rights. Those are two very different goals. The studio tried to slap together whatever it could, hoping that the result would be good enough, make some money, and then maybe bring these characters into the X-Men universe. Basically, Fox wanted its own Marvel-style machine, the way Disney had one. Naturally, the plan collapsed before it even got started, and after the success of one small movie, Josh Trank probably should not have jumped straight into a massive studio blockbuster. That was Frameback. Subscribe for more rewinds and see you on the next one.